In this video, I'm going to show you how to make these two wooden builds. Hey guys, welcome back to David's DIY Reviews. On this channel we do a lot of tool tutorials and woodworking builds like this. So if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing for a lot more really great content. And remember guys, dimensions and instructions will be in the description below if you need them to, build these projects yourself. Now let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is cut out all your pieces. You're going to need 8 pieces at 18 inches long. These are going to be the sides and the bottom of your crate. Then you're going to need 6 pieces at 11.5. That 11.5 plus the width of the bottom is going to give you that 12-inch height. Those are going to be your ends. Now if you wanted, you could probably cut a handle into the 2 top end pieces. But this is, going to be a nice, quick, simple build. I'm not going to do the handles on this one. And then you're going to need 4 pieces at 8.5. And these are going to be the 4 corner posts in the crate. Now these corner posts, I've done them one by one. They could be a bit smaller, they could be a bit bigger, that'll still work. All my slats are just over 1/2 inch thick. I've actually used a Spruce 4x4 and ripped it this way, and then ripped them to 2.5 inches wide. And that's going to give you a nice gap between the slats. You could go a bit bigger, a bit smaller, depending on the material you have. And all the dimensions and instructions will be in the description below. So once you've got all your pieces cut out, we'll get ready for assembly. And I actually made a mistake. We actually need 10 of these slats for the sides and bottom. So we'll get everything cut out like this, ready to go, and we'll get assembling. So how I'm going to go about building this is we're going to build the ends first. We're going to get the ends nailed on like this, nice and even, or if you want a different offset. Because I'm not doing the handle, I'll probably do a bigger offset here so there is a handle, like a grip like this. And then we'll get the 2 ends nailed up, and then we'll put the bottom and the sides on. So we'll go ahead and start nailing this up. I'm using these 1.5 inch finishing nails actually. That way you don't end up with too much of a nail head sticking out. And I'm probably actually just going to do 1 nail for each end of each piece. That way I can kind of tweak it around at the end if it needs to be, squared up or anything like that. So I'll go ahead and just start nailing up my ends. And when I put the top one on here, I'm going to space it up just a little bit, just so there's a bit of a gap right there. That way the post isn't going to come flush to the top of the crate. So like I said, I'll space that up probably just about 1/4 inch. You can almost just kind of eyeball it. I mean, nothing on this has to be perfect. We kind of just hammer it, nail it together. You just kind of, go as you go and make it work. And then like I said, for the middle one on the end, you can do it centered or you can drop it down a little bit like this. I'm going to drop it down a little bit to create a gap for a handle because I'm not cutting the handle hole in my top slat on the end. So we'll just go ahead and nail that one up. And like I said, I'm still just doing 1 nail per piece so that I can kind of twist this, manipulate it, whatever I have to do. Because I'm using, Spruce 4x4s and I've ripped them, they're a little bit twisted, they're a little bit crooked, but this is like a rustic looking crate, so that's going to go with the look. So now you've got 1 end. That's going to be the end of your crate, and the sides will go here and then the bottom. So we'll nail up another one of these, and then we'll continue on assembling. And just remember when you nail up your second one that you make that top slat on the end stick up that same amount. If you just kind of eyeballed it, just do the next one the exact same. So now we've got our 2 ends nailed up. We'll go ahead and start putting the sides and bottoms. And like I said, I'm using just 1.5 inch finishing nails because I don't always like the look of a nail head, but sometimes people like the look of a nice old looking nail head on a crate like this or a rustic piece. So whatever type of nails you want to use, it's just going to change the look that you end up with your crate. So what you can do, the easiest thing to do probably is to nail your bottoms on. And it's a little tricky to get it started. You can kind of set up both your ends like this and just balance one piece on top. Get one piece centered right on that corner where you want it, and go ahead and nail that in. You can nail it, I'll probably nail it into the post. You can nail into the slat if you want, but depending on what material you're using, if you nail into that slat, there's a good chance you might split that wood. So I'll probably nail it into the bottom of that post. So we'll just get our first bottom slat nailed up, kind of tacked in place. And then we'll flip it around here and we'll get the other corner of that slat kind of tacked in place. And like I say, I'm just using one nail pretty much everywhere to start. And then when I get this finished, we'll put in the rest of the nails. So now that you've got something that's kind of freestanding like this that holds itself, it's going to be a lot easier to get the rest of those nails in place. So we'll go ahead and we'll nail the other side slat on the bottom. So the bottom is going to have 4 slats, and then the sides are going to have 3 slats. So you can pretty much, I mean, if you want to measure and get this just perfect, you can. But you can pretty much get your 2 side slats on and just kind of eyeball the 2 middle ones. So we'll get these 2 middle bottom slats nailed on right now. So now that we've got the 4 bottom slats kind of tacked in place, and you can see you can still manipulate it like this. If it's not quite square, we'll be able to flip it over. And now we'll flip it on its side and we'll start to put the sides on. And this is when we'll really tweak it to get it nice and square. And there'll be 3 side slats, and you can kind of space those out. You can do the same gap with the handles on the side if you want. I'll probably do them more even because I only want handles on the sides. And like I said, all the dimensions and some instructions will be in the description below. When I nail this first top side slat in, I'm probably going to nail it into the side slat, because if I nail into this piece of 1x1, it's going to tend to bounce around a lot. You can probably get away with a lot of materials nailing into the end of the side slat, right into the end grain, and it's not going to split it. You probably shouldn't have any issues with that. So we'll go ahead and we'll start nailing on these sides. And as you can see here, the way I've designed this is that if you space these side slats evenly, the bottom end is kind of bumped up a little bit because of the bottom. So this lines up perfectly with the side slat and leaves that nice gap for a handle. But you could drop it down, you could raise it up, whatever the look you want. But you know, with this build process that I've laid out, it works out really nicely and the gaps all line up. So you know, it's really starting to look like something now. We'll flip it over and we'll nail on the other side. So now we've pretty much got what looks like a finished crate, but we're not quite done yet. What you're going to want to do now is you can kind of tweak it, manipulate it around a little bit, get it set just square, and we'll start pinning in all these other nails and putting 2 nails per slat on the ends, and that's going to sure it up, make it look really nice, make it nice and strong. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark and cut the 3 slats for the seat top of my bench. They're going to be 3 feet long, and I'm using actually spruce 4x4s that have been ripped into pieces that are 3/4 of an inch thick. And you can use anything between maybe a 1/2 inch and 1 inch for the seat top. It's going to work for you. You can use any material as well. And the width of mine is 3.5 inches. You could go probably 3 to 4 inches. All that's going to change is the gap between the slats on your seat back. You can kind of play with those dimensions or with the material that you have to make it work, you know, the way that you want it to look. So I'm going to go ahead and mark 4 of these and cut them. So I'll go ahead and cut those, actually I said 3 before, but 4 seat slats. So now I'm going to mark and cut the pieces that go around the bottom of the bench top, the skirt or whatever you might want to call it. The short side is going to be 11.5 inches, and the longer side is going to be 28 inches. Now all these dimensions, you can definitely change them based on, you know, maybe material that you might have or the size of the bench that you want to do, but if you do it exactly like this, it's going to work out. So I'll go ahead and cut those out now. So now you're going to have your 4 slats cut out. You're going to have 2 of the longer pieces of the box of the skirt, 2 of the shorter ones, which, you know, if you picture this bench upside down, these are going to be the box underneath. And then the next thing to do is going to be to cut the legs, which are just solid 4x4s that are going to stand in the corners, like if this bench was, like I said, upside down. So I'm going to go ahead and mark, if my pencil was right way around, my legs at 19 inches. Now you can make your legs, you know, whatever length you want, based on how tall you want your bench to be, but 19 inches plus the thickness of the bench top, it's going to give you a pretty nice height. Now what you want to do too with your combination square, if you have one, they're handy to mark around a 4x4 like this, is you just line it up and you mark it all the way around, so that way when you cut with your saw, assuming you're doing it by hand, that you can follow that line all the way along as you cut through. And like I said, you can use any material for the legs. You can use really whatever you want. I'm going to use these 4x4s because the 4x4s are what I used. I ripped them to make all the other pieces. So whatever works for you, whatever you got, I'm going to go ahead and cut these now. And admittedly, try not to do it cross-handed, admittedly cutting these legs with a handsaw is probably the most difficult part. But I mean, there's only 4 of them. You take your time, do a good job, it'll be great. So at this point, you should have your 4 legs, your 4 bench tops, the 4 pieces of skirt. And what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and give all the edges a quick little sand. It's going to take a bit of time, but it's going to be a lot easier to sand up all your edges now, which is with some coarse sandpaper, than it is to kind of get into all those grooves after you've assembled it. So we'll go ahead and sand all this up, and then we'll move on to assembly. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to build the box that sits under the seat and get your legs set in the corners. And to do that, I'm actually just going to take one leg, lay the short piece of the skirt on top like this, and nail through, and get 2 sets of these set up, turn them on their side, and put the long lengths on. Now I'm going to use 3 1/4 inch nails to drive through here to get a lot of good strength into that 4x4. So a nice thing to think about, you're going to want to set your nails in a position that once these 2 nails are in, that you have space to put nails in from this side for the other piece that's going to run that way. So we'll go ahead and put a couple nails kind of top and bottom-ish, and that's going to leave us room for the other ones. Make sure it's nice and square. I mean, it is a rustic bench, so if it's not perfect, it kind of goes with the theme, but if it's not square, it's not going to sit right. So remember when you're nailing this up that the top here is really important to be flush, because the bench top is going to sit right on there. And then you also want this to be nice and flush as well with that edge of the 4x4 for the other portion of the runner of the bench top to sit across the side like that. So we'll go ahead, we'll nail up 2 of these, and then we'll put the sides on. One more nail here, and then we'll move on. Could definitely use some work on my nailing skills, but it's rustic, so, you know, kind of works out. So now that you've got the 2 shorter pieces nailed onto your legs, you've got 2 sets of those, you can stand those up, and we'll go ahead and nail on the longer section of the box. So just really line it up nice like this. Make sure, once again, the top is really flush here so that the seat top will fit on really nice. And we'll go ahead and we'll nail that up. Also make sure your legs are relatively square. You can kind of tweak it around at the end to get everything squared up with the bench top as you nail it down. You know, if it kind of turns a little bit as you're nailing in, that's great. I always find you get your first nail in and set. If it pivots a little on you, you can straighten it up as you do the second nail. So like I said, it's kind of turned on me a little bit there. So you just straighten it up. Get your other nail set. Straighten it up exactly how you want it. Give it one good hit and it's going to hold it. Go ahead and nail it up. And you've probably noticed I'm not being particularly super careful with, you know, the spacing of my nails from either side or up or down, or even missing as I'm hammering. Because like I say, I'm kind of building a rustic piece, and you know, that kind of stuff, it doesn't look too bad when it's not quite perfect, especially if it's an outdoor bench or a garden bench. But you know, all these dimensions and whatnot, you can apply these to like a modern contemporary bench, or you know, any type of bench you want to do. You know, the neater and finer you want to tighten up your dimensions and your assembly, the nicer it's going to look to suit, you know, whatever purpose you're doing. So I'm just getting my last nail in here, and then we'll move on to the bench top. Now, if this was going to be a bench that you were going to use a lot, you could probably definitely put a couple supports down here, or, you know, or across here, or on an angle, whatever suits you look. But this is going to be more of a decorative bench for me, like a garden bench kind of. So I'm just going to go ahead now and we'll put the bench top on. And like I said, if your bench at this point has a little bit of a wobble, as we nail on the top, we can kind of tweak it, you know, push it in certain directions. And as you nail it up, it's going to stiffen it up and it's going to stay nice and square and nice and flat. So to get your bench centered, to get the slat centered, I'm just going to go ahead and mark center, and then I'll start out from there when I nail on the bench top. So the width of mine is 12 3/4, so half of that is going to be 6 3/8. So if we mark that here, that'll be our starting point. When we start to nail on the bench top, we'll just kind of lay those where we want them, and then kind of eyeball the other two and get them laid out just as we want. So I'm just going to lay these on here and kind of get them set exactly how I want them to sit. The width that I've made mine is going to make them pretty tight. You don't want this outside one to overhang too much. You want it to have a lot of stability there. So we'll just kind of lay them on exactly how we want. If you happen to have made your bench top stick out a lot longer, you might want to measure this gap so that it's the same on both ends. But for this one, you can kind of eyeball it, get them laid out, and then we'll nail in a couple, and then we'll go from there. So I've got one set on here exactly where I want it now. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of tack it in place with these 1.5 inch nails. And that's going to hold it until I can really drive in those 3 1/4 inch nails. It's going to sturdy it right up. So I'll put one of those at each end of all the boards, just to get it, like I said, held in place. And we'll just do that for the rest of the 3. And if you notice as well, the way that I set up these dimensions, we're able to nail down into the top of the 4x4 that's the leg, and that's going to make this really sturdy. You might also notice that my boards are a little twisted, a little warped, they're not perfect. But like I say, that's the look I'm going for. You know, this is like definitely like a rustic looking piece, but like I said before, you can use perfect straight, you know, D4S, and make this a nice looking straight square cut, a modern piece as well. All these dimensions in this build process would apply. So now that you've got your 4 boards, the bench top set across, we're going to take these bigger 3 1/4 inch nails again and drive them down into the top of the 4x4. And we'll just do that all the way around. And then after that, we'll probably drive some more 1.5 inch nails into the skirt here that's underneath, because you don't really want to drive a thick nail into that. You'll probably split it. So we'll put some smaller nails here and at the other end as well to hold these nice and square and straight. So I think I'll go ahead and put those last couple 1.5 inch nails right here down into the box of the bench, and that'll hold it nice and square. Do that at both ends. And then I think I might even do a nail down through here into the middle of this portion of the skirt. You'll just have to kind of try to, you know, find the right spot to nail it through and set one of those. So remember guys, instructions and dimensions will be in the description below. Also in the description below, David's DIY review merchandise, hats, masks, shirts, you know, stuff like that, as well as links to all the tools I used in this video to make these projects. See you guys in the next one.